What's going on, guys? It's your boy NH Express back with another video, and today I just want to review the trades that we ended up taking for the week. We ended up accumulating a total of 20 RR, so let's get into this thing. So as you guys see on our first trade, we ended up taking on CAD JPY. We can see the structure on the weekly time frame are making higher highs and higher lows. Higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. So as you guys can see, we ended up closing above right here. So technically the market's bullish. We're waiting for a push and a continuation to the upside. So on the weekly, on the daily time frame, we can see that price was making that high. We can see on the weekly, we had a pullback, shift the structure, right? Shift the structure again. Now we're just waiting on that pullback. Right here, we had a double bottom, which means that we closed above. So we had a pullback, then we waited on that pullback. When we jumped onto the 4 hour, we can see we have those lower highs and lower lows, or higher highs and higher lows, right? So we have that continuation. Now we're bearish. We had that pullback, right? Shift of structure, and now we're bullish. So when we jumped down on our first entry, we ended up taking it on the 15-minute time frame. As you guys can see, we have that creating higher highs and higher lows, right? Okay, this is just structure now in the market. Now we have a lower low, so technically we're bearish. Now we're bullish, again, because we closed above. Now we're bearish. Then we have that shift of structure, so we're bullish. And we look for our entry. So we ended up taking our entry on the 15-minute time frame right here on this Morningstar pattern. Then when we go to the 30-minute time frame, we took our second entry. So as you guys can see, in order for it to continue going, so we had that higher high, then it obviously needs to make a higher low. So we had a pullback. Now we looked for a second entry to continue going to the upside. So as you guys see, we had another Morningstar at this area of interest that was forming on the 30-minute. So we ended up taking a position right there, and we can see that we had a nice rejection from the EMA, and we had the Morningstar pattern, so that's why we entered the trade. Then we have Euro AUD. So as we go to the weekly time frame, we can see that Euro AUD is in a massive bearish downtrend. We're making lower lows and lower highs. So we've been consolidating at this area for the last three weeks, and now we're actually making another move to the downside. So if we jump to the daily, we can see that we were actually bullish. We were making lower lows, right, and lower highs. Lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. Technically this was bullish, right, because it broke above, but we broke below again. So that's a lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. Then we broke above, so now we're technically bullish. We had a pullback, and then we waited to take our entry. And that's even a nice left, head, and right shoulder. So as we jump down to the 4 hour, we can see we were making that push to the downside. Lower high, lower low, right? Right here is another lower high, lower low. Shift of structure because we closed above, pull back, and we waited on an entry on the lower time frame. So as we jump down to the 30-minute, we see we had that lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. Then we had that shift of structure, pull back, shift of structure, pull back, entry. And then we ended up catching this position for about a total of 4 RR. So then we were looking to then take another position once it reached above this area of interest. And obviously we know that when it has a lower high, it needs to have a lower low. So we were waiting for that push above this area of interest to take another entry to continue going to the upside. We ended up thinking that this was a nice entry right here, this Morningstar. We enter, and then it just went and stopped us out because it was somewhat of a tight stop loss. But then ultimately it just continued going to the downside because the overall trend on the weekly is still technically bearish. And then lastly, we have AUD USD. So as you guys can see on AUD USD, we're making higher highs and higher lows, right? Higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. Now we have a lower low because we broke underneath and we just had a pullback. So as we can see, we can expect even next week to have a second entry because now we have that lower high forming. When we jump down to the daily, we can see a nice left head, right shoulder forming, right? So we have a nice left, head, right shoulder. So we can anticipate next week we're going to have that break and go to the downside. But for this week, what we saw was that since we're looking to take a trade to the downside, we were making higher highs and higher lows, right? Higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. We broke below, right, from right here. We had a pullback. So now we're bearish. And now we're just looking to continue taking that entry to the downside. On the 4 hour, we have same thing. We were waiting on that pullback to take a trade. So we had that push, right? Lower highs, lower lows, lower high. Now it's just market structure. We broke above. We had the double top, and we just took our trade to the downside. When we jump down to the 30-minute, we can see that we're making higher highs and higher lows, right? Higher highs and higher lows. Higher high, higher low, lower. And this is just market structure now because it either has to close above or below, right? So we ended up closing below, right here. Wait for a pullback, entry. So we ended up taking a total of 20 RR for this week. I will be dropping my analysis video for this coming week tomorrow, probably around 3 p.m. EST, and I'll see y'all soon. Peace.